good morning or good evening to everyone, wherever you're calling in from today, and welcome to the Conservation Law Foundation's virtual coffee hour. Today we'll be exploring the Gulf of Maine from the comfort of our homes. And the Gulf of Maine is really an extraordinary topic for us right now. As many of you know, it's warming faster than almost any body of water in the world, which makes it a really important laboratory for climate solutions and climate issues that are facing oceans and communities right now. It's home to some of the last Atlantic cod and northern right whales spend months at a time feeding in this body of water, and it's an area that the Conservation Law Foundation has really made a priority to protect. We also want to dip into the recent proclamation by President Trump, which rolled back critical protections for the Atlantic's only marine national monument, and what that really means for the area as we move forward. Joining us this morning, I'm really pleased to introduce the man that many of you guys already know, Brian Skerry, who is a National Geographic photographer and has produced some of the most enduring and iconic images of the Gulf of Maine and oceans all over the world. And then we're also welcoming Priscilla Brooks, who is the director of the Conservation Law Foundation's Ocean Conservation Division. After years of traveling oceans all over the world, Brian Skerry happens to be back in his home waters of the Gulf of Maine working on a project that he's going to share with us today. And Priscilla has been working with ocean conservation and the Conservation Law Foundation for over 20 years and has a wealth of knowledge to share with us about the ways that the organization has pushed for protections and sustainable fishing in New England's waters. As mentioned earlier, we'll be taking your questions throughout the program, so you can use the chat box feature to let us know the questions, or for our Facebook Live viewers, please submit your questions as comments below the live stream. So I'm thrilled today to start the session with some questions for Brian. So Brian, you're often found around the world, but I think many people may not know that your home waters actually are Maine and that you have a deep connection to this area and that you grew up in New England. And maybe you could share some of that backstory with us and talk about kind of how you've connected, your connection to place through, to photography and your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, Megan. It's a pleasure to be here and having a little chat with you and with Conservation Law Foundation, one of the true heroes for the planet, for sure. But yeah, to your question, that's right. I started diving about 1977. I was, I think, 1 year old at the time. And, began exploring these native waters where I grew up. I grew up in Massachusetts. I live now in Maine, on the coast of Maine. But, for over the last 4 decades, whenever possible, I have been diving in these Gulf of Maine waters, my native waters. The last 22 years, I've been working for National Geographic magazine, doing stories about the ocean, about marine wildlife and conservation issues in many cases. So, my travel schedule has taken me to all 7 continents and to many countries around the world, focused on a lot of these issues and subjects. But with the new project that I'm beginning now, it's such a thrill to be able to return to my native waters. And these are places that I love to dive. I love temperate waters. I tend to be, maybe because I was born here, I love cooler waters and, nutrient-rich places that have great biodiversity, which the Gulf of Maine does. So that alone would have been a reason to just want to stay here and work on it. However, I've also realized that the Gulf of Maine and these New England waters are changing rapidly. As you pointed out, a scientific paper was published by the Gulf of Maine Research Institute just a few years ago by Andy Pershing that cited that the Gulf of Maine is warming 99% faster than the rest of the global ocean. It is the epicenter of oceanic global climate change. And I think what's happening here in many ways will be a harbinger, a bellwether of what the rest of the planet can expect. So as we look at this unique place and celebrate all the good things that it has brought us over the centuries. I think we also have to look at how we can maybe try to mitigate or at least better understand these problems, and that's what I hope to do in a small degree through photography and storytelling with science.
Yeah, that's a great segue to my next question, which is maybe walking us through how you moved from this diving and photography into advocacy and what that means for you.
Right. Well, ultimately, I consider myself a journalist and a photojournalist. So I have to present the facts and let people draw their own conclusions. That being said, you can't do something for several decades focused on one given sort of place like the ocean and not have opinions. I mean, it would be ridiculous to see this kind of destruction occurring and not want to advocate for that to some degree. But I think ultimately it has to be done from a non-biased position. We need to take the latest and greatest science and show that to people through images. I learned a long time ago that human beings are especially visual creatures, that we respond emotionally to pictures and to motion pictures. And if we combine those images with good science, then we can tell a very powerful story. And I think, I've also learned that, human beings are reasonable creatures as well. And if we're presented with evidence, we'll often draw the right conclusions. The problem is that we often don't have that information. Lives are busy and we have our jobs and our kids to get to soccer practice and school and homework and all the things that we have to do. So, our bandwidth is somewhat limited. But, if we can see this information in a visual form with that good science and good storytelling, then I think we're better informed. We can be better consumers, better citizens, and we can make decisions that will ultimately be better for everybody and better for the planet. So that's kind of a broad answer, but I think at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to do here with the Conservation Law Foundation. What I do at National Geographic is to take that science and figure out a way to present it to people in a visual form that hopefully gives them information to make decisions.
Yes. Would you be willing to sort of share with us what you're working on now and kind of what you're excited about when it comes to your current visual storytelling work with the Gulf of Maine?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a little bit what we alluded to here, the fact that after more than 2 decades of working for National Geographic, traveling around the world, and 4 decades of exploring the ocean, I've sort of returned to my home waters. And, for the next couple of years, I'm going to be pretty much planted here and doing a number of things. I want to really celebrate this historic body of water. I want to show the biodiversity that still remains, even though this place has suffered from many, threats and assaults. I often say the ocean is dying a death from 1,000 cuts. The ocean is resilient and can heal itself, but when you've got so many things being sort of thrown at it, it can't fight all of those. But first and foremost, I want to take people into these waters. I want to show them the incredible biodiversity. The Gulf of Maine has often been referred to as a sea within a sea. It has this extraordinary geologic history, if we, not to get too deep in the weeds, but this place was formed after the last ice age. The Laurentian ice sheets retreated and left this amazing place with all these different sediment bottoms, and the western edge is this rocky coastline, and on the eastern edge we've got deep ocean, and the continental shelf you've got upwellings with nutrient-rich waters. You have the mixing of the Labrador currents and the Gulf Stream. In the Gulf of Maine, those currents, circulate in a counterclockwise fashion. because it's in a temperate water zone, you get seasonal stratification. So in the winter and the summer and the spring, you get mixing of all of those nutrients. It's kind of like the perfect recipe. If you were creating, some great culinary dish and you had all the right ingredients and the right sort of seasoning and the right mixing, and then at the end, it's what we have here in the Gulf of Maine. You've had this proliferation of life. You've got tiny copepods and plankton and nutrients, and then you've got giant whales like right whales and humpbacks and sei whales, and you've got sharks and lobsters and all these great things in between. But it is also, from a history standpoint, it is the place that in no small way helped foster the colonization of America. It was Europeans that came over in the 14th century and the 15th century because of this ocean bounty, because of codfish, and helped foster that colonization. And on the top of the state house in Massachusetts, we still have a codfish. The early money in New England didn't have God on it; it had cod. It was in cod we trust. And yet today, we've fished out 99% of them. We are at 1% of colonial levels of cod. We've wiped them out. We have the most endangered whale on the planet, the North Atlantic right whale, in our waters. And these are anthropogenic stresses. These are things that we've done because of overfishing and, maybe lack of good management. And now the Gulf of Maine is facing its greatest threat ever with this climate change, this 800-pound gorilla that is really going to be a game changer. It is changing the chemistry of the Gulf of Maine. The ocean is the greatest carbon sink on Earth. It takes in all the carbon and gives us back oxygen. Every other breath that we take comes from the sea, but it is like a sponge that is saturated. It can absorb no more, and the chemistry is becoming acidic, and anything with calcium is going to be eroded. So coral reefs and seashells and little baseline sources of protein like copepods and pteropods are being eroded. So what does that mean for the future? What does it mean for the future of fishing industries and the lobster industries? All of these things will suffer based on the models we're seeing due to climate change. So the work that I want to do is going to be about, sort of celebrating the biodiversity that still remains photographically, but then also trying to bring visual context to some of these stresses that we're seeing here so that people understand what it means. What does it look like when climate change affects this historic body of water, unique in the world, really? So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do, and it's a continuation of work that I've done with CLF over the years, and hopefully we'll scale it up a little bit more here with National Geographic.
Gorgeous. You've done such an excellent job describing what makes the Gulf of Maine so special, so visually compelling, and also talking about what's at stake. I was hoping you would spend a moment talking about your experience with diving Cash's Ledge. It's a place that I've been learning about through Conservation Law Foundation, and I believe you've done some work there. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. Cash's Ledge is one of the most amazing places I've ever explored. Having dived for over 4 decades in New England, I've seen some beautiful things, but it was on the projects that I was doing with CLF that took me out to Cash's Ledge several years ago, where I experienced it for the first time, and I'd never seen anything quite like that. The highest point of Cash's Ledge comes up to within maybe 30 feet of the surface, so it's essentially like this seamount out in the middle of the Gulf of Maine. It is a kelp forest that rivals anything we might see in the beautiful kelp forests of California or Patagonia or New Zealand or other places, Tasmania. It is just stunning. I remember the first time I dived down, I thought I had reached the bottom, and it was just sort of this false bottom. The kelp grows up maybe 8 or 10 feet and then just sort of folds over, and it creates this illusion of being the sea floor. But as you dive down, you actually sort of break through. And I remember actually standing on the tip of my fins on the actual sea floor and just barely being able to poke my head up over the top. It was this unbelievable place. It's a place where I could still see pollock that filled the skies. I mean, I don't see this anymore. Back in the 70s and early 80s, when I used to go diving in Cape Cod Bay or off of Rockport in Gloucester, I would see codfish. I would see schools of baby pollock. I just don't see that anymore. But Cashier's Ledge is a place where I could still see that. I remember the first dives, looking up at the water column and just seeing it filled with pollock and seeing codfish, these red cod, because they take on the coloration of the kelp out there, just swimming all around. It was like going back in time. It was like having a time machine. It is this one little oasis in the middle of the Gulf of Maine that still has some of those jewels that existed long ago, and screams out for protection. I have some images, some old pictures. This is not any new work, but if we want to maybe buzz through a few of these pictures, and then I have two little videos at the end that were made out there on Cashier's Ledge. So maybe we could take a look at some of these pictures just to give folks a sense of what the waters here and the marine life look like in the Gulf of Maine. So if Phil, if you're ready to sort of launch in with that opening picture of the lobster, I think it is, we can have a look and just kind of go through this quickly to give people a sense. We live with the photos. Okay, great. Yeah, so I mean, I just have this picture that I made a few years ago. I think that I made this one out at the Isle of Shoals off the coast of Maine and New Hampshire. The iconic American lobster, North American lobster, the Maine lobster, which we all love, whether we want to eat them or just look at them or take their pictures. We can just buzz through these here, Phil. Yep, and just a giant sea star, this beautiful sun star with all the color. We can go to the next one. I think it's a picture of squid, again, filling the sky with these Atlantic longfin squid. These are just some of the animals that call this place home. A wolffish, an Atlantic wolffish, this toothy grin that only a mom could love, probably a face that only a mother could love, but, a really cool looking animal. These delicate Metridium anemones that, feed on nutrients, hanging off of rocks with that beautiful emerald green backdrop, the ocean that we have up here. Northern anemones, like these Telia anemones, it's like being in a china closet. It's like all these delicate animals that could easily be destroyed. Of course, we have apex predators as well, like the blue shark that we see right here, a picture that I made in the Gulf of Maine. And then I think the next one shows a day when the water was very blue. Sometimes in the summertime, we get these eddies of the Gulf Stream, and it looks like we're diving in tropical waters. But this is New England. This is how New England has often looked. We, of course, have the emergence of great white sharks in bigger numbers that are coming. This is a picture I made in Cape Cod. Gulf of Maine, of course, extends from Cape Cod up to Canadian waters into New Brunswick, but the emergence of great white sharks. We also have, basking sharks, a non-toothy shark, a plankton feeder that feed on plankton in these waters as well. And of course, marine mammals like this gray seal that I photographed off the coast of Maine. This was a picture I made several years ago off of Acadia National Park. He was posing very well behaved for a moment here before he went back to biting my fins. And of course, the iconic North Atlantic right whale. This was a picture I made in the Bay of Fundy. Also, the Gulf of Maine here, of a fluking whale here going down at sunset. But this is an animal whose story is very tragic. They are identified by this very distinctive V-shaped blow when they blow out, when they breathe. You see this really noticeable V-shaped blow. But these are animals that, they live in the northern reaches of the Gulf of Maine up in the Bay of Fundy, and they migrate down to Florida to have their calves. This is a mom and calf, an aerial photo. They do that in the wintertime. But these are animals that get, because they are urban whales, because they live so close to this heavily industrialized section of North America, they become hit by ships. I think, we see a picture here. This is one I made off of Provincetown in the springtime when they're skim feeding on copepods. We see the coastline of P-Town in the background there. It just gives you a sense of how close to land these whales get. But this was a photo I made up in Nova Scotia of a dead right whale that was towed in by the Coast Guard, where a necropsy was done, and it was determined that the cause of death was ship strike. It had been hit by a ship, one of the leading causes of death for right whales. So very sad. It's tragic. And then I wanted to get just to a few pictures of Cash's Ledge. Megan asked about Cash's Ledge, this real jewel of the Gulf of Maine. This is a photo that shows some of that kelp, this beautiful amber and crimson kelp that is just everywhere out there. A place that could easily be lost if we don't protect it. Here we see a cunner swimming through, and these forests of kelp. It really is quite extraordinary, unlike anything that I've seen anywhere else. It's so lush and thick. This was a photo I made of these blue mussels. At certain times in the life cycle of Cash's Ledge, we get these nurseries of baby mussels. Of course, they grow into bigger blue mussels, but these are filter feeders. They help keep the water clean out there. And everything's connected. It's like the gears of a Swiss watch, everything working together. This shows those baby mussels where I saw two sea stars, two starfish, as we used to call them, sort of just laying out there. There's so much to see on any given dive. Your senses are on overload. You really have to focus on small sections of ocean bottom to really begin to see things. It's so much going on out there. Again, just a look at the seascape out there of all of these fish, the sky filled with pollock and cunner and the codfish. I think in the next photo we'll maybe see, this is a photo just looking up, and all of those little sort of silhouettes in the sky are pollock. You just don't see this in other places. I used to see this quite often, but now almost nowhere. But Cash's Ledge, you do. And this is one of those red codfish, just stunningly red. They eat crustaceans out there, and they also have sort of adapted this camouflage to blend in with the kelp forest out there. So they're a little bit different coloration. And this was a close-up, a portrait of one of these codfish that was coming in to check me out with the kelp in the background. So anyway, just a very quick view of these places. And I have two short videos. The first one is just about 3 minutes long, and it shows the kelp forest that was done by my friend Lou Lamar. And then the second one we'll go into shows two sei whales feeding right on top of Ammon Rock on Cash's Ledge. So we can run these back to back and just let folks see this place in motion. This is a difficult place to get to. It's about 90 miles out from the coastline, out in the middle of the Gulf of Maine, 90 miles from Portsmouth, from Portland, from Boston. It's sort of equidistant from these land locations. And it's hard to get out there. The weather has to be really good. And I think it just speaks to the fact that, we've tried to get out so many times and been, thwarted by the weather. But on any given day, we would just happen to be out there, and this is what you can see. You see whales feeding at the top. You see kelp forest alive with cod and all these other fish, and just so much out there. And yet, most folks, would have no idea that this existed. I didn't know that it existed until a few years ago. I mean, I knew of it, but I'd never been there. So I think, speaking to your question, Megan, about, the advocacy and so forth, I think it's just about showing folks what exists, what belongs to them, and then saying, should we protect it? I mean, there is not one single place within all of the Gulf of Maine that is protected right now. And if we care about the air that we breathe and our children's future and, having a healthy planet, isn't it reasonable to ask that we protect some portions of it for the future? I mean, that just seems like common sense.
Couldn't agree more. And, watching those images, I'm thinking about how, when we do environmental storytelling and conservation storytelling, we have this blend of a rational case and an emotional case. And when I watch your videos and see your pictures, I find, both are evoked in me, but those were really moving, sublime, and powerful images. And you've been such an incredible advocate and partner and ally for Conservation Law Foundation over the past 5 years. So thank
Thank
you.
you.
Kind of building off of what you're saying, I think, maybe turning to Priscilla to talk about protections that, that have been removed as of this month. Um, I feel like when we talk about the Northeast Canyons and seamounts and President Trump's recent, call to open up this monument and this protected area to commercial fishing. And I know Conservation Law Foundation is planning to sue and take some positions on this. And so, Priscilla, could you maybe just talk with us about why the monument is so special and what the Conservation Law Foundation, plans to do to protect these beautiful places?
Right. Thanks, Megan. And good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Let me just say, though, that, I'm thrilled to be doing this with my friend, Brian Skerry. And Brian is really one of the best friends the ocean ever had, and you can see why. Early on in our campaign to protect special places in New England's ocean, we knew that we had to figure out a way to take people, underneath the waves so they could see, the beautiful places that exist. Most people can't see that. And, the famous oceanographer Sylvia Earle has always said that, you can't love a place that you don't know. And so, partnering with Brian, we've been trying to get people to know these special places. And as you've already seen, Brian can bring the ocean to life like nobody else. So we're really thrilled to be working with Brian. So the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument is truly a remarkable place in New England's ocean. It's incredibly dramatic in its topography and extraordinary in biodiversity and abundance of marine life. It was designated in 2016 at the end of President Obama's term, and it encompasses about 4,900 square miles. That sounds like a big area, but actually it's only about 1.5% of US Atlantic waters. It's really a tiny area. And it has 3 deep sea canyons that rival the Grand Canyon and 4 seamounts, which are extinct volcanoes. And these volcanoes are taller than any mountain east of the Rockies. It's this distinctive terrain of the canyons and seamounts that really fuels the incredible productivity out there and makes ideal conditions for marine life to breed, to feed and to find shelter. So it's a very special place. Deep in the monument are found, over 60 species of deep water corals, and it seems every time there's an expedition, they find new ones out there. In the water column, there's a profusion of plankton and krill and squid and other fish that attract larger predators like tuna and whales and sharks, fuels the ecosystem. Every time the New England Aquarium has conducted an aerial survey, and they do it periodically out at the monument, the scientists document hundreds of animals on the surface every time in about a 4-hour survey. And the last survey they did, they found a very two rare blue whales out there. And blue whales are the largest whale on the planet. In fact, they're the largest animal on the planet. So it's really an amazing place. And, that's only what we know. So much of this area has not been explored yet. And Conservation Law Foundation, we want to maintain it as a haven, as a sanctuary, as a living laboratory for scientists better understand our ocean and how climate change is impacting it. And we want to do the same thing for Cassius Ledge. Seeing those photos of Cassius in the film, it just, it's made me love that place. And we're going to do everything we can to provide permanent protection for Cassius.
Yes.
To what you just said, which was beautiful. I mean, and that really frames the issues perfectly. But, for folks in the audience, I think, many of them may already know this, but most scientists have told us that we need to protect about 40% of Earth's oceans. Even though we are terrestrial creatures and we live on land, we very much live on a water planet. If we look at those pictures from NASA astronauts or satellites and we see our planet, the minute we look at a photo like that, we instantly can see a couple of things: that we live on this beautiful planet, this blue marble floating out in the darkness of space, but we also can see immediately that we live on a water planet. It's often been said that about 3/4 of the Earth's surface is ocean. But maybe a more important statistic is that 98% of the biosphere, 98% of the livable, habitable planet where life can exist on Earth is ocean. It is where we get the most of our oxygen. Like I said before, every other breath that we take comes from the sea. It takes in the carbon that we produce in automobiles and airplanes, and it gives us back oxygen. And yet it has become saturated. It's running out of its ability to do that. So scientists tell us that we need to protect about 40% of the world's oceans. Today, depending how you look at it, where it may be 2%, 2 or 3%. The United States created the very first monument, a protected place in the Atlantic Ocean. Think about that, where this country didn't just get created a couple of years ago. We've been around for a while, and now we've just created the first place that's protected. It's a deep ocean place, and it's a good start, right? We have a long way to go, but it's a start. And now those protections have been rolled back. The moment that declaration was signed, 135 longline boats could go in there the next day and not only catch swordfish and sharks, but bycatch of sea turtles and all these other things. So it's off most people's radar. It's happening underwater. It's happening far offshore. And again, we have busy lives. We don't get to really, focus on everything that we must. But, these are issues that matter. If we don't pay attention to them today, that window of opportunity will be closed. So, I wanted to give it that sort of global framework that we have a long way to go to protect this ocean for the future. And the last thing we should be doing is eliminating protections that were created. We need to be going the other direction, and yet we're going in the wrong direction.
Well, I think that brings up a good opportunity to hear from both of you. What are the risks if we don't correct this lack of protection? What are the stakes here? What are we looking at?
Well, out at the monument, it just takes one pass of a trawl, as Brian was saying, one pass of a heavy trawl or dropping, lobster and crab pots onto these extremely vulnerable corals. So, the damage happens in an instant, yet it can last for tens, hundreds, a century or more if these ecosystems can recover at all. So, as Brian was saying, scientists tell us that one of the best things we can do for our ocean to protect biodiversity and make it resilient to the changes that are being brought by the climate change is to set aside protected areas and, at least 30% in the next decade.
Yeah. Priscilla makes a really good point. One of the things that I think often gets missed when we talk about climate change is there's a very simple equation, and that is that marine protection equals climate stability. One of the things that any of the countries that are signatories to the Paris Climate Accord can do to meet their obligation, if they are a country that has coastline, is to create a marine protected area. It will be the thing that helps create climate stability. So when we see all of the problems that are being created by climate change right now, I mean, it's happening in real time. One of the best things we can do is to create huge swaths of ocean that are protected. This benefits everybody. I've documented this in countries around the world where there's always resistance by some folks about protecting certain places. We don't want to lock it up. We don't want to, it belongs to everybody. But the truth is, everybody benefits. I've seen this in countries where, they've created marine protected areas and fishermen are benefiting. I mean, their bounty has increased. Even in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, where we've had marine protection, in Papahana Marine Reserve that President Obama expanded to the full 200-mile limit. In the last 4 years, there's been not only no negative impacts to the fisheries because of that, but I think they've actually increased because of the spillover. You get fish reproducing, and they don't know where the boundaries of the protections are, so they go out and they swim beyond that, and fishermen can reap that bounty. It's an investment bank, right? We're putting money in the bank, and it's growing with interest, and everybody benefits from that. To not do that would be like a farmer eating his or her seed corn. I mean, that would be counterproductive. And yet that's what we're doing when we're not protecting these places. So climate stability is a big part of that, ensuring seafood for the future, commerce, everything, the air that we breathe, all of these things are very, very integral to our own lives. And they all come from protecting the ocean. So we've, for a very long time, not treated the sea very well. We dump 18 billion pounds of plastic into her every single year. We, drill and rake the bottom and take all the fish. 90% of the big fish have been taken. Half the world's coral reefs are gone. We've degraded so many habitats, but it's not too late. We can reverse that tide if we act now, and the decisions that we make today will determine our future. So we have two choices. We can either, as Cousteau urged a generation ago, protect what we love, or we can stand by and bear witness to the destruction and demise of our oceans and, in turn, ourselves.
That's so well put, Brian. Out at the canyons and seamounts, the lobster and crab fishermen have been given 7 years to transition out of that area. And, government data shows us that actually there's been no economic impact to the fisheries that were in those areas, no economic impact over the 4 years. Revenues and landings have either increased or remained steady. So, it's a big ocean out there, and it's possible to protect it and also support, viable livelihoods out there. But look, the bottom line is this, that President Trump, doesn't have the authority to open the monument to fishing. The designation has already survived challenges by the fishing industry, and his proclamation is not going to stand, which is why Conservation Law Foundation is taking him to court to make sure that his illegal action doesn't stand and that we keep this special place protected forever.
Thank you both. We're going to transition to questions soon from the audience. And so, Brian and Priscilla, I was just wondering, is there anything else that you want our viewers to know or to walk away from today's chat with?
I would just sort of close by saying, reiterating some of what we've already said, that, these places, this body of water, New England waters, whether it's the Seamountain Canyon Monument or the Gulf of Maine, all of these places are very special. And the folks that live here or the folks that live on the other side of the planet ultimately benefit from marine protection. I don't think any of us that care about these places are trying to prevent any industry from making a living. In fact, just the opposite. I work with fishermen. I have the greatest respect for them. I enjoy eating seafood, and it's because of that I want to protect these places. I want to have fish in the future and lobsters and everything for my children and everything else. I want there to be lots of resources and bounty in the future, and I want to have clean air to breathe. And we can work locally. We can work in the places that are in our backyard, and have a conversation. It's not about one group preaching to another. I think we all have to have a seat at the table and figure out ways to make these things happen. And that's very important to me. So that would be my sort of summary statement, that these places are special. What I've learned about exploring them is that they are fragile. The ocean can be resilient, but at the end of the day, damage can be irreversible as well. So we have to act prudently for our own future.
Thank you. Priscilla, anything you want to close with?
Yeah, I would just add that, the Gulf of Maine is, it's a vital part of what makes New England, New England. It's our backyard, it's our home, and we need to take better care of it. And we know how to do that. Setting aside special places in our ocean, just like we do on land. We've been doing that for 100 years on land. We have an amazing network of national parks, and protecting special places is critical to the health of our ocean, and we have a responsibility to protect it. And I would just ask everyone to do everything they can to protect our ocean.
Thank you. We're going to move to the first question, and this is for Priscilla from Pam. And the question is, has CLF participated in the Gulf of Maine Council's work? And if so, what are your views about its contributions to protecting the Gulf's marine biodiversity?
Oh, great question. Yes, I've been a member of the Gulf of Maine Council for over a decade, and it's a very unique body that draws together all the entities around the Gulf of Maine, Canadian and U.S. So the Canadian provinces and the U.S. states that border the Gulf of Maine. And while they don't have any, as a body, they don't have management authority over resources. It's a tremendous forum for sharing information and science and discussing how to do better for the Gulf of Maine. So it really is a fantastic entity, the Gulf of Maine, and perhaps unique in the United States.
Thank you. The second question is for both of you, and it's from a viewer who wants to know, what can we do to help CLF protect these fragile areas forever?
Priscilla, you might be better suited to answer that.
Oh, well, first off, you can be a member of CLF and support our work. But, I think what's really important is to share your own stories about the ocean, about New England's ocean, and your own excitement with your friends. And also talk to your elected officials, because that's one of the most important aspects of this, is ensuring that our elected officials are supporting conservation in the ocean, and seeking that all important balance of ensuring that our ocean is protected, healthy, and thriving, while also allowing for all of us to capitalize on all that the ocean has to offer by the way of food and clean energy and transportation and recreation. We're off balance right now, but reaching out to your members of Congress and governors is tremendous. They really can't hear enough, and they are instrumental in moving the politics of ocean management and protected areas. And CLF, often provides those opportunities through our action alert, through petitions, and we really encourage that.
Yeah, I would echo that, Priscilla, that, as we've seen quite evidently in recent years, elections do matter. And, supporting candidates that support science and conservation is key. It is in your own best interest. It is in your family's interest and our future. So, become engaged in those conversations, and, an informed citizen, an informed voter is one of the best things we can have. And an informed consumer, making choices that are better for the environment about what you choose to purchase and eat or drink. Single-use plastic containers are harmful to the environment. All of these choices, it takes a little time. You have to do a little bit of work, but it's not that hard, and you can make good choices for the environment. In this region right here, I think this year is the 50th anniversary of Rachel Carson's work. And she worked here in Maine. And, we think about how one person could take on these established companies and really bring attention to environmental problems and get things done. I think it was Margaret Mead who said, never underestimate the power of a group of dedicated individuals or a single person to change the world, because indeed that's the only thing that's ever changed the world. So a question that asks us what we can do to help CLF or to help this region is a really apropos question, and one that doesn't have a complicated answer. It's about, becoming engaged and informed, and, a consumer and citizen acting on that information.
Great. The next question, and it relates to something, Brian, you mentioned earlier about your respect for fishermen and the relationship that needs to be nurtured there. And this is something I've come across in my own journalism, is that sometimes there seems to be this tension between conservation and industry. And so the next question is about, how do we kind of build alliances with fishing communities in protecting the Gulf of Maine? Why is that important, and how do you guys think about that?
I'll let Priscilla go on, because I think she's got more experience with that. But I think it is about respect. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a situation anywhere in the world throughout history where one group preaching or telling somebody else what they're doing wrong or how they should do things has ever been an effective strategy for making progress. I think, we have to have dialogue. But at the end of the day, there is science and there are facts, and we have to sort of look at that. Now, if we can agree that this is what is happening, then it's a dialogue about how do we move, how do we protect these places? If we can agree that they need to be protected, that there is some level of protection that is necessary for ensuring the future to be healthy, then it's about, having a dialogue about how we do that. I mean, if we don't agree on that, then we have a real long way to go. But, as I said, I've worked with fishermen my whole life. I mean, I grew up working on fishing boats and, going down and getting their nets off of rocks and shipwrecks, and in the middle of winter going out in sub-zero temperatures because a trawler lost or hung up his door on a shipwreck somewhere off the coast of Rhode Island or Massachusetts. And, I'd go out and help those guys. And I always said if I wanted to do the most complicated mission, if I wanted to go to the moon, I'd probably hire fishermen because they could get me there. They are the most resourceful, innovative people I've ever met. They're really good at what they do. And, if they want their children to be able to fish, I think, they get it too. They know more about it than I do. I just happen to work in the world of science and journalism, and but we all know the same thing. So I think it's about having respect and dialogue that will get us to that next step. But anyway, maybe Priscilla can add something to that.
Well, I would only add that I grew up watching the fishing industry, being fascinated by the business of men and women going out to sea, catching fish and bringing it back to the dock, for the dinner plate. And I have tremendous respect for that. And I early on became fascinated by that industry and the challenges of managing fishing with a healthy environment. And I think up until now, the focus on our ocean really has been to manage our fish populations, and it's our premier ocean management law is really focused on fishing, and of course, we have mixed results here in the Gulf of Maine. Atlantic cod is at the lowest population levels practically in history right now. And while sea scallops are just charging ahead in an extremely healthy population, and it's this focus on fisheries has pitted the environmental community and managers against the fishing industry without having a greater mandate, which is a healthy ocean. And we all want that. We all want a healthy ocean. We want healthy fisheries. We want healthy coastal economies. And I really think the key is, how you set the table for the conversation. And, ocean planning has been a big part of New England over the last decade, mostly focused on the new uses. But when we're trying to figure out, for example, how to site wind farms, we need to be doing the same thing with how do we protect the special areas that are going to generate the wealth of biodiversity that's going to support the ocean ecosystem and support all the people that depend upon it. And I truly believe that, if you have a mandate that says we've got to protect special areas and set the table and bring all the stakeholders together, including fishermen, environmentalists, coastal communities, scientists, of course we can figure out what places to protect, what areas make sense to fish. I think it's a no-brainer, but we don't have that system in place yet.
I was recently speaking with Dr. Ariana Johnson, who helped write the Blue New Deal, and she was talking about we have so many descriptions of what the worst case scenarios look like, but we don't have enough of that mandate and that vision for how good it could be if we could focus on the center of the Venn diagram on what we do agree upon and what would be mutually beneficial for all. I think I'll ask the fourth and final question, which is, as an average citizen, how might we increase awareness or change our lifestyles to help conserve these ecosystems?
Priscilla,
Brian,
do you feel comfortable with that? I mean,
I'll let you go.
I sort of think it's many of the things that we've talked about. Everyday folks, as I've said several times, we have busy lives. I mean, maybe now more than ever, we've got so many stresses on our daily plate with everything that we're dealing with. But at the beginning, at the foundation, I think we can all agree, as you said, that we want certain things. We want healthy food, and we want clean air to breathe, and we want to know that our families and our children will be okay in the time ahead. So what an everyday citizen who's got a busy life can do is just take a little time and become informed. When you go to the grocery store every week, you're making purchases, and the consumer can drive so much of this equation. You know, what we choose to buy or not buy matters. You can demand that you don't want, you know, everything you buy in 7 layers of plastic. You can choose not to buy things that are wasteful. I mean, I met with people last year in various European countries that have done some really progressive things. You know, they're starting zero waste stores where you can go in and fill your containers with shampoo and toiletries and ice cream that, you know, that the company will take back the tin. It's the old milkman model, and they'll sterilize it and give it to you again. So you're not generating more trash. There are companies that are embracing a circular economy with plastics, and you know, if you have an appliance in your house, rather than throw it out at the end of its life, they take it back and they either reuse or recycle that plastic. You know, so finding out which companies that are doing these kinds of things, finding out things that you can buy that are better, local sources maybe. What seafood is a better choice to eat, and which one is maybe not a good choice to eat. And then, as I said, being an informed voter, working with candidates and supporting elected officials who support science and conservation. I mean, it's in your best interest. To not do that is to be very short-sighted, in my opinion. So I don't think it has to be complicated. I just think we have to take a little time and do some homework, and then make choices based on that information.
That's well said, Brian. The only thing I would add is, well, one, you know, doing everything you can to reduce your carbon footprint, whether it's a more fuel efficient car or riding your bicycle to work, or turning off the lights in your house, or maybe supporting solar power. There's so many ways that you can do that, not to mention reducing your dependence on plastics. And then, you know, in addition to just becoming informed about our ocean, reaching out to your elected officials and letting them know that you care about the ocean and you want to see it protected. I think that you know, our elected officials don't hear enough about the public's how much the public cares about the ocean and how much they want to see it be healthy. So I just couldn't encourage that more.
Thank you both, Brian and Priscilla, for a really inspiring and informative conversation today, and for all your expertise and the work that you do. I think we're going to close the session, and the conversation doesn't have to stop here. You can sign up for CLF's e-news by going to www.clf.org so that you can stay informed of these important issues and take action alongside your friends and community members. I'm Megan, and from my home to yours, stay healthy and safe, and thank you for supporting the Conservation Law Foundation. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.